Welcome to the continuing story of the Rotary Club of Edina. Before we get started, I just want to take a moment to talk about a few fellow Rotarians who passed over our break. The first one was a longtime Rotarian, Jim Krasowski, who passed away on December 18th. There will be services held on January 7th at Annunciation Church in Minneapolis. Also, longtime Sergeant-at-Arms Audrey Swartz, who greeted everyone with a welcoming smile and a devilish twinkle in her eye. Audrey was always a delight, who participated in multiple Rotary international trips and hosted legendary Women in Rotary parties at her home on Lake Minnetonka. There will be memorial service held on 111 at Washburn-McCreevy right up the street. Also, Arthur Rauner passed away on 12/16 at the age of 92. Arthur was a man who lived his life in service of Jesus Christ. Arthur had a profound impact on the community with leadership of Colonial Church. Many of us received kind notes of support in joy and sadness, which were always appreciated. Public service has not been scheduled. Let's take a quick moment, pause, and think of these fine people. Thank you. And we will move on. Today we have a speaker, Issac Orr. We appreciate you coming and speak. Member Spotlight. So, Josh, going for it. Just got a little Devo look there with Becky, who's not sure what the creature is doing. So, fun. And then looks like John wants to get away from these guys. Looks like he's half step. This is at the holiday party, which was a ton of fun. More celebrations. Oh, nice ears. Antlers. Oh, there's fun. Yeah, there's Jean. Julie, and then we got the choral singers. So one of the things, everybody receives a Rotary Magazine once a month. It's a very great magazine. If you have people who ever ask you, like children or friends, what do you guys really do with Rotary? Do you just go and meet for lunch? Show them the magazine, and they'll really find it pretty amazing, the amazing things we do, not only domestically, but internationally. Dan Hallberg lined up all of the wonderful Salvation Army bell ringers. Bell ringers. He's been doing it for many years. Dan?
Do you want a quick report?
Yes, I do.
We did. We were ringing bells at Jerry's Foods from Monday the 20th through Friday the 24th, 6 hours each day. We had 20 fellow Rotarians and their families that joined in, and we totaled collections in the Red Kettle of just over $8,100. We had musicians. Hannelor was there with her accordion, and Paul Peterson with his band. So we had a wonderful time. Look forward to doing it again this year. Thanks.
Thanks, Dan. Great job as usual. I understand the music was great. Weather, a couple of people had some pretty cold ones. Then we had gift giving, and maybe we do this now. Are you okay with that, Gene? If you come up and talk briefly about the generous gift giving.
Thanks, Joe. I'm here to say thank you and give you all a big hug for your generosity. We were able, as you can see, to make an abundance of gift giving this year, both gifts and gift cards, and I found a quote that reminded me of all of your generosity. A little spark of kindness can put a colossal burst of sunshine into someone's life, which is what you all did this year. I have Jess Pierce with me today. Jess is the youth housing program manager at 66 West. And when I delivered the gift cards, she and her team were just about ready the next day to stuff the stockings for the youth. So I'm going to have her tell you a little bit about them.
Well, first of all, good afternoon on this cold day. I want to, on behalf of Simpson Housing and 66 West and all the young people, I want to say thank you in abundance. We've been in partnership for several years now, and it's an honor to actually put a face to all of the people that invest in our village, is what I like to say. And you know, holiday times, holiday season, it's hard for probably all of us in our own ways. And so just that little bitty thing is a huge thing, you know, with the gift giving and being able to, you know, give somebody something that probably wasn't going to get anything, so to speak, you know, during the holiday season. And so as Jean and I are, you know, building our relationship here, I was talking to her about villaging, and I was talking to her about really talking about new year, new you, and something that I firmly, strongly believe in is accessibility. And so our youth having a beautiful budget, first of all, for us to bring really amazing programming, and I know some people in this room also contribute financially to our program. I mean, we've been able to do so many cool things with these young people, and so for that, I will forever be grateful and thankful, because again, accessibility is key. So I know that we're on a time schedule. I hope to come back and I can speak to you all more about our programming and kind of get into the weeds. But again, on behalf of the youth, Simpson 66 West, thank you.
Thanks, Jay. Appreciate it.
Then we had the folks, this is Katie and Ralph Campbell out in Hawaii. And also we had a full group out in at the Rose Bowl with the Gumps and the Campbells. And is that Jody? There's Jody. They worked on the Rose Bowl float, which was about education.
Is that a gopher?
Yes. No, it's a gopher dressed as an owl. And we have birthdays: Mike Hagan, Andre Brewer, Ted Yock, Luther Amundsen, Rick Carlson, Steve Slice coming up, Catherine Gump, Sam Coate, Chris Mazer, Bob Gubrud, Charlie Bear, John Carlo, and Shelley Loberg at the end of the month. Very exciting. We have January Rotary anniversaries. Look at all those anniversaries. Yeah, I'm in there too, Matt. We got quite a few. Hey, Matt, how many years is that? You know, you're the.
Putting me on the spot here?
Yep.
I don't know, it was something like 329 years.
Okay.
Change the slide though.
Okay. Today's meeting, we can't do it without our helpers. We got Matt working the front desk, and he'll also do guest introduction, greeter and invocation. Tom Cook. I think Tom can handle invocation well today. Greeter and thank you to the speaker is Jim Ryman filling in for Gay Clapp today, and also speaker will be Jim. Speaker introduction will be Jim. Photography Mark Jessen, and videographer Chris, and AV and Zoom assistant Ryan Wilson. Ryan, how many folks do we have on Zoom?
Let's see here. We're at 15 today.
Wow, that's great. Hello to everyone on Zoom. And we'll start with the invocation.
We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Now, you all know what's on my mind today. So our nation began. It's important to recognize that our political affiliations, the things that we believe and the things we carry out matter, but I want to speak less than this day about that than about our common humanity, our divisions less than our desires for hope and prosperity for our families and for the future of this wide world. No doubt January 6th has become a day in our country to stir many feelings, and many feelings, I'm sure, for each of us that are part of this Rotary community. But I ask us all to pray together this day for the blessings of our union, for healing in our nation, and for a better way forward together in a new year. So let us pray. Help us, O God, to continue a good work begun in these United States. Help us to confront any complicity we offer to injustice and inequality. Strengthen us to face our honest truths and the continuing need to forego ignorance and prejudice and contempt. Strengthen us as we continue as fellow Rotarians to address poverty and violence while building a better world for all people. Accept our humble thanksgivings for all that you have given to sustain us, and grant us wisdom to build that more perfect union of which our Constitution speaks. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Of the things that we think, say, and do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Thank you.
Hello, everyone. We've already met our one guest today, but we'll meet her again. Jess Pierce with 66 West, guest of Gene Morrison.
Good afternoon. I trust everybody had a great holiday and Happy New Year for 2022. I would like to tell everybody about the next exciting and interesting leadership development series, which will be happening at Think Bank in Edina on January 12th. It begins at 7:45 a.m. and you can either attend in person or in Zoom. And the speaker that day will be the phenomenal Rob Redding. And the topic that's going to be discussed is something that's probably very critical at this time. He's going to be talking about emotional intelligence. So I'm sure everybody can learn from that. And the event is open to the public, and so invite friends and colleagues. If you'd like to attend, you must register and look out for an email or visit the Edina Rotary website. Thank you.
Hello and Happy New Year, everybody. I'm here to talk about bowling. Believe it or not, it is going to make a comeback. Michael, if you're watching on Zoom today, this is one that I know you've been looking forward to. So we are going to try and do our bowling event. It is going to be Saturday, February 5th, 6:30 to 9 p.m. at Tuttle's in Hopkins. The cost is $25 per person. And we'll be getting the registration set up online. And we do need to get a head count by January 21st, which is about 2 weeks before the event. So we do have a little bit of timeline. Hopefully we'll see everybody at Tuttle's. Thank you.
Thank you. The leadership program is really a great program that's held over at Think Bank, and it's a really nice setting. I've been to 3 of them. They've been fantastic. Highly encourage people to participate. Also the bowling. I've been a 3-time champion. Ton of fun. I don't know if Paul Moody has...
Way to sneak that in.
Well,
Good job.
so I'm here to introduce Jim Ryman, who is going to introduce the speaker. Jim has been a member of our club for 7 years. He has served on local grants committee, and next year, he will be our speaker chair, which is very exciting. Jim's hobbies are wood turning and has provided our club with many beautiful bowls and has turned objects for the gala and auctions over the years. They're just beautiful. I went to his home for the fireside chat, and they were just beautiful. He's married to Deb for 48 years. He has 3 children, 8 grandkids, with a 9th on the way. Jim Ryman.
Hi, everybody. Happy New Year. We're in for a very interesting presentation this afternoon. Isaac Orr is a policy fellow at Center of the American Experiment, where he writes about energy and environmental issues, including mining and electricity policy. Isaac has written extensively on hydraulic fracturing, frac sand mining, and electricity policy, among other energy and environmental issues. His writings have appeared in a number of publications: the Wall Street Journal, USA Today, New York Post, The Hill, Orange County Register, the Washington Times, and many other publications. Prior to joining Center of the American Experiment, Isaac served as a research fellow at the Heartland Institute, where he specialized in energy and environmental policy. Before becoming a research fellow at the Heartland Institute, he served as an aide in the Wisconsin State Senate. Isaac graduated from the University of Wisconsin in Eau Claire with studies in political science and geology, winning awards for his undergraduate geology research. And I understand he has a new puppy by the name of Maple, because it's the color of maple syrup, which touches my heart because I am a longtime maple syrup producer. How about that? Let's welcome Isaac Orr.
Thanks very much. All right, everybody, thanks for having me. Another pertinent fact that isn't in my bio, which should be: I grew up on a dairy farm in Wisconsin, so I am just the stereotypical Wisconsinite. If you drew one up on paper, it would be me. So, so thank you for having me today. The title of my talk today is The Future of Energy. Energy is obviously at the top of a lot of people's minds, especially with gas prices going up, the cost of home heating and the cost of electricity all increasing. And it's not as bad here as it is in Europe currently, but this is all things that we need to be keeping in mind because we may be headed that direction. So the title of my talk is The Future of Energy. I just Googled the future, and this is the best image that came up. So yeah, looking forward to this. So about Center of the American Experiment, we are Minnesota's leading public policy organization. We specialize in a whole bunch of different issues, not just energy and environment. We have a bunch of work on education, labor, the economy. We have 2 economists on staff, and we recently hired a former FBI agent to be our fellow on crime and safety. So our quarterly magazine, which is on all the tables, has a circulation of more than 80,000, and we aggressively market the research we produce. So the title, or the talk that I'm going to be giving today, is based on page 44, the article in the magazine. You don't have to agree with everything in the magazine. You just have to agree with me. All right, so we don't need to beat this over the head anymore, but yeah, I grew up on a dairy farm in rural Wisconsin, which is why I'm so passionate about issues that affect rural America. So today's talk is largely based on the book Energy and Civilization by Václav Smil. He's a professor up in Canada. He's one of Bill Gates's favorite authors. So Smil is just meticulous in his calculations of what's energy look like in the past, what does that mean for the future. So while this talk is titled The Future of Energy, a lot of it's just going to be rehashing, the human experience for the last 200,000 years and what that's meant for energy. So why is it relevant? Energy policy is a primary focus at the state and national levels. Many people seem to think that the future holds this kind of, inevitable shift towards wind and solar power, but I don't think that that's actually going to happen. So to help Minnesotans understand why wind and solar are probably not the future, it helps to understand the history of energy. So what is energy? Energy is the ability to do work. That's what the dictionary says about energy. So for almost all of human history, energy was scarce, and humans were an energy-starved species constantly thirsting for more and more useful forms of energy, and harnessing more energy enabled us to do more work and raise our standard of living by allowing each person to perform more work and increasing their productivity. So this is my grandpa Phil and his team of horses in the late 1950s, I think it was. To his, I don't know, maybe it was the 40s, I'm not sure. I should ask my mother when this took place. Phil in Greek is lover of horses. My grandpa absolutely loved his horses. He had horses until he died. But he got a lot more work done when they got the Alice Chalmers tractor, right? So there's been a huge shift in the type of energy and the amount of energy that each of us is able to harness over the last 100 years that I don't think people necessarily appreciate and what that's done for the human standard of living. So solar, wind, and biomass were the original forms of energy that we used, because basically before 1850, all the energy that humans used was quote unquote renewable. It was either wood, dung, or animal labor, or just us hustling with our own muscles. So the graph shows the amount of energy humans used from 1800 through the present. In 1800, humanity used 452 times less energy than humans in 2019, and nearly all of it came indirectly from either biomass. So it was basically solar energy, but I'll talk to you about that in a second. So U.S. energy consumption, 1776 to present. For the longest time, it was basically wood. Then we started using coal. Coal came out of favor because natural gas and petroleum were more dense forms, more convenient forms of energy that were more useful. And then around the 1950s, nuclear power emerged. So we see in the bottom of that graph, we start to see wind, biofuels, hydroelectricity, and all others. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail later. But we really need to talk about the bad old days, and we need to talk about the low energy world humans lived in, because it was really no paradise. The average life expectancies were less than 40 years old. In Germany, every second child died. People's statures were shorter because poor nutrition and illness limited human growth, and life was nasty, brutish, and short. And it remained that way until we began using coal at scale in the 1800s. So this is a map of a graph of skeletal remains in Europe showing the average height for men. And then around the 1850s, it shoots up because all of a sudden we have adequate nutrition. Solar power is the original energy. So this is the first form of energy we used. The sun energized plants through photosynthesis, allowing them to grow and store that solar energy. So plants are kind of a battery, a natural battery, if you will. So humans ate those plants, or we ate animals that ate the plants and other animals, and that provided us with the muscle energy that we needed. We performed work by using the muscles, and we used those muscles to hunt, gather, build shelters, and go to our destinations. Fire was a big deal. We forget about how important fire was, but it changed the game by allowing us to access solar energy that otherwise wouldn't be available to us. So all of a sudden, we're able to heat our shelters with wood by burning it, right? So we're using that chemical energy that's stored in the wood. It also allowed us to eat meat and other sources of plants that were otherwise undigestible. So that increased our available energy to us, and that's really what this is. Like Václav Smil, I understand that his writing is very dense, but it's basically human history can be described as the flow of energy, and I think that that's really important. So human energy consumption was amplified again when we domesticated animals. This is me as a 4-year-old feeding the pigs with my foot-powered tractor, not diesel at that age. So when we are able to harness and control more solar energy by raising animals, we could eat a wider variety of plants, such as grasses. Human stomachs were unable to turn into useful energy. Essentially, when we domesticated cattle, that was a big deal because basically the ruminants, they're able to eat grasses and turn that into energy that otherwise we wouldn't be able to. So those cattle got turned into draft animals later on. Horses were obviously superior draft animals. So adding animal energy to our portfolio exponentially increased the amount of energy humans could harness, meaning you're increasing the amount of work that we can perform. Because one human can work at a rate of about 0.13 horsepower, meaning a horse can perform about 7.5 times more work than a human over the course of a day. So my grandpa Phil, when he has 2 horses, all of a sudden he's dealing with 15 times more power than just him working out there in the field. So hydropower. The invention of the water wheel added kinetic energy of rivers to the human energy arsenal. Water was first used by the ancient Greeks to mill grain. By the 1500s, water power was the most important source of motor power in Europe, with as many as 20,000 water mills by the 18th century. The water wheels freed humans and animals to perform other work, and hydropower offered distinct advantages over animal labor. Early medieval water mills replaced 30 to 60 people from the task of grinding flour. Later, hydropower was used to run sawmills, mining operations, make textiles, and generate electricity. The biggest problem with hydropower isn't there aren't enough rivers to use it in every application you might want. So my other grandpa, my grandpa Orr, he grew up, he was the youngest of 6 kids. His dad died when he was 3 years old in the Great Depression. So he said, when we were growing up, we had 2 horses that we used for field work. One was okay, and the other was an old nag that would die every winter. And every year, the one that was okay turned into the old nag that would die every winter. So when you're talking about, okay, what's the best way to be, farming, the tractor was a huge improvement. But wind, I'm usually closer to the screen, so this is kind of awkward. But yeah, wind had been used for sailboats for a long time, but then it became used for grinding flour. In the 17th century, approximately 200,000 windmills operated at the peak of the technology. Windmills increased the amount of energy humans were able to harness to perform work because new development could occur in new areas, and basically it could get away from riverbanks, right? So of course the disadvantages of wind are some of the things that we still experience today. So the drawback of wind is that it can't be stored. So this energy was used primarily to mill grain or pump water into livestock tanks and saw lumber into boards, because that way you're essentially storing that energy as productive work. So wind was also dependent on the weather, meaning it can't be relied upon to provide energy at all hours of the day, and this is why horses were used as backup sources of power for milling grains during calm stretches in Europe, similar to how natural gas power plants back up wind turbines for generating electricity when the wind isn't blowing. So here we go, enter the fossil fuel age. While each of these sources of renewable energy increased the human standard of living, they ultimately had limited availability and reliability. Coal is considered a fossil fuel, but in reality, it's a long-term form of solar. I am just not on it today, sorry. It's a good form of energy storage. So basically, all of these plants get baked. They get buried by sediment, and heat and pressure turns them into a sedimentary rock that is flammable. So ancient plant life in swamps accumulated over millions of years that eventually buried and became kind of like a natural battery for energy. So coal gained widespread adoption in the 1800s for cooking and home heating. Coal offered several advantages over wood because there's about 42% more energy in coal than in the best hardwood. So as a result, coal lasts longer, produces less smoke and pollution when burned, and requires less material. So in England, yes, this is what I'm going to talk about. In the 16th century, Britain ran out of wood, and they resorted to coal out of kind of a last resort. They were actually importing wood from France in order to run a lot of their small industry and their manufacturing. And then they realized, like, oh, this coal works, and like, oh, this is a lot more has a lot more power than the wood that we were using. We don't have to dry it. It's a lot less of a pain. So then all of a sudden, that enabled the Industrial Revolution and actually allowed Britain to reforest over time. So the steam engine, the invention of the steam engine near the start of the 1700s turned coal into the most important fuel in industrializing societies, allowing humans to turn millions of years of stored solar energy, coal, into useful work. Unlike water or wind, coal could be transported and used anywhere, and also coal can be used at all hours of the day, rain or shine, giving humans around-the-clock energy, which increased industrial capacity at mines, manufacturing facilities, steelmaking sites, and mills. So here we have oil, natural gas, and electricity. Coal's reign at the top of the energy pyramid was relatively short-lived because of natural gas, oil, and electricity offered superior value in terms of energy density and ease of transportation and use. Oil became widely used after it was discovered in Pennsylvania in 1859, touching off the first oil boom in the US. And oil has about twice the energy density of coal in its liquid form, which allowed it to be used in internal combustion engines. And kerosene became the fuel of choice for lamps, displacing expensive whale oil and doing more to save the whales in Greenpeace. This is a picture from Vanity Fair where the whales are toasting the Titusville well because they're safe. All right. Oil. The invention of the internal combustion engine in the late 1800s transformed transportation by allowing for smaller personal vehicles to be built and fueled rather than relying on big, bulky railroads. This led to a revolution in personal transportation, farming, mining, and other industrial uses, replacing the steam engine and animal labor. Oil is now the largest source of energy for Americans, powering most of our transportation sector and also heating our homes. So this is total U.S. energy consumption by source in the United States. This is from the federal government's Energy Information Administration. Oil is about 37%, I believe. I'd have to see, it's difficult to see from here, but 32% is natural gas, 11% is coal, 9% is nuclear, wind is about 3%, hydro is 3%, biofuels are 2%, wood is 2%, and solar was 1%. As of 2019. So that's all the energy that we use. So the electric era. The widespread use of oil for lighting was short-lived, however, because in 1882, Thomas Edison, Tommy as I call him, built his first commercial electricity plant, ushering in an era of electricity. When it comes to energy, nothing is as powerful, versatile, safe, or easy to use or clean as electricity. Lighting was the first thing to become electrified, and Edison's light bulbs were 10 times brighter than lamps and 100 times brighter than candles. They also produced no soot, and they were safer. By the early 1900s, the use of electricity had been expanded to washing machines, water heaters, refrigerators, kettles, and sewing machines. So now we're going to start talking about things that are a little bit more relevant. That was basically a history lesson, but I think it's important to understand where we came from in order to understand, okay, where might we go? Most of the energy policies crafted today are aimed at changing the way we generate electricity. And unlike other forms of energy, electricity is not a source of energy by itself. Electricity must be generated by converting primary energy sources such as coal, natural gas, oil, uranium, water, solar, or wind energy into electric power. And by 1970, natural gas and nuclear power began contributing to the electricity supply in a really significant way. We think about nuclear power as kind of this old technology, but it's only been around for electricity generation since 1956. Dwight Eisenhower was a huge proponent of nuclear power because it was basically atoms for peace. He said the best way for us to ensure that there is, security on a global stage is to make sure that everybody has access to the same level of prosperity that Americans have. And the best way to do that is nuclear power. So I think Eisenhower was really a visionary in that regard. So we're going to talk about energy returned on energy investment. Wind and solar don't produce as much power because they're unreliable. They essentially have to depend on the weather. In Minnesota, solar panels produce electricity about 18% of the time, and wind turbines produce electricity about 33% on an average, but some of the most efficient ones can generate electricity about 45% of the time. So as a result, wind and solar have a lower expected return on energy invested than other sources like natural gas, coal, hydropower, or nuclear power. And as you see on this chart, nuclear is the one on the far right, and it has the highest energy return on energy invested. So when we're thinking about, okay, what's the best fuel for the future, I think that we really need to be looking at nuclear power as the answer, because it's the only source of energy that's denser than fossil fuels. So it's crazy. There is basically all the energy or electricity that you will need in your lifetime. The amount of uranium you'd need to generate that fits inside a Coke can, right? So one pellet of uranium weighs about the same as a AAA battery, but it produces as much electricity as a ton of coal. So when we're thinking about, okay, how do we make energy not just more reliable, but more efficient and less expensive, I think that has a real opportunity there. So yeah, the energy density of coal is about 33 units of energy, whereas the uranium is off the charts. So you have to have the whole stack. It's a good graphic. Uranium has 3.9 million units of energy. So yeah, and unlike wind and solar, it produces carbon dioxide-free electricity around the clock. So a grid powered by nuclear power won't experience California or Texas-style blackouts. So the high energy density of uranium is why I think it has the potential to someday generate electricity at the lowest possible cost. So I know there's a lot of stuff in the 50s, 60s, and 70s about nuclear power being too cheap to meter, and that never came to fruition. I don't think it'll ever be too cheap to meter, but I do think it'll be the lowest cost source of energy. So that's why the Mars rover, a spacecraft, is only as strong as its power source, which is why when NASA was designing its Perseverance rover, they used plutonium as the fuel source. So some NASA missions to Mars have run on solar energy. The Insight lander currently operating on the red planet bears solar panels, as did the Twin Spirit and Opportunity rovers. This is from the NASA website, but Opportunity is a mascot for the weakness of solar energy at Mars, since the rover's end came when a massive global dust storm blocked it from tapping into the sun's light. Run a rover on nuclear power and you don't have to worry about that scenario. So, and this is getting to be a little bit more practical here. So during the polar vortex of 2021, right, so February, Texas had their big blackouts, and there were blackouts in the regional electric grid just to our west. It's called the Southwest Power Pool. It stretches from North Dakota down to Oklahoma. They also had rolling blackouts. We didn't, fortunately, but during this time, we were basically, this is the performance of the wind fleet during that time. I don't know if there's I don't think there's a pointer on this, is there? Or is it just? All right, yeah, I'll do that. So during some points of the polar vortex, this is the output of the wind. So sometimes it was producing a lot of electricity, but then around the time when the negative temperatures hit, it was only producing the entire fleet. So this is 13 states worth of wind turbines. This is North Dakota, Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, South Dakota. It was only producing about 4.5 or 4.9% of its potential output on February 9th, and then 3.8% on February 20th. So, you know, that's a huge swing, and when you have a huge swing like that, you have to increase the amount of natural gas capacity that you're using. So basically, when the wind dies down, you have to fire up a natural gas plant in order to make up for that difference. You don't have to do that with a nuclear plant. It's basically just steady eddy, and it'll take care of business. They're the most reliable plants on the system. So I firmly believe that we should all aspire to be Norman Borlaug environmentalists. Are you guys all familiar with Norman Borlaug? University of Minnesota graduate, guys. Probably the most consequential graduate from the University of Minnesota ever. So in the 1950s, he developed a strand of wheat that was resistant to mold and rust, they call it. So therefore, he was able to feed more people than basically anybody else. People think that he saved more than 1 billion lives with his more productive wheat crops that he then took to, it was in Mexico that he developed the wheat, but it went to India. It basically started something called the Green Revolution, where the amount of food that we were able to grow surpassed the ability of people to eat it. So basically, this man is responsible for reducing the amount of famine in the world almost single-handedly, because he was just dedicated to crossbreeding all of these different strains of wheat. And then when he was in Mexico, he realized that the wheat was growing a lot of head, right? So there was a lot of grain on it, but the stalks were bending over if it was too windy. So then he crossbred all of these wheat varieties with Japanese dwarf varieties that had shorter stalks that were stronger and could hold it up. So this guy basically single-handedly went to India and badgered the prime minister into adopting this. Otherwise, that they were projecting huge famines and death over there. So what we want is something called no regrets environmentalism, where we increase the human standard of living while also improving the environment, because we were able to increase the productivity of the land by growing better crops. That means you don't have to plant as many crops to grow the same amount of food on a smaller amount of land. So they say he saved millions of acres from the plow. I should have had more slides. I just assumed an astute Rotary Club would know Norman Borlaug. But yeah, we need to improve the environment by making our energy system more efficient, not less efficient, which is why I think nuclear power is the future. So, questions, comments, scathing rebuttal?
Any thoughts on geothermal?
I think that geothermal can work in certain capacities, like Iceland or California, where you have it close to the surface. If you want to put in a ground pump geothermal unit at your house, I don't have a problem with that. It's fine. It's just going to be like a 20-year payback period. So if you're cool with that, fine, do it. Yes, Jim?
Isaac, isn't nuclear power isn't the big issue there, the storage of the waste?
Yeah,
And-
yeah.
And how, as we move forward, it seems like eventually the right answer for our power needs, but how do we deal with the waste?
So 90% of the energy in spent nuclear fuel is still there. So in France, they recycle the fuel. It's something that was outlawed by the Carter administration, and I don't know why it's still illegal. It just doesn't make sense. It's one of those kind of like regulatory relics that is still impeding progress in the United States. But they call them breeder reactors. They're working on getting those up to Nuclear Regulatory Commission standards, basically. It's a really arduous process of getting a new reactor designed through the federal government safety regulations, which it should be. I'm not saying that that's bad, but it is, you know, it takes a long time. So the spent nuclear fuel, the thing about energy is every source of energy produces some sort of waste. The question isn't will it produce waste, but it's how much waste is it producing and what kind of waste. So for a nuclear power plant, it's all contained in a concrete cask in a pool inside of the power plant. So it's entirely contained. So if you burn electricity or if you burn coal at a coal-fired power plant, you've got fly ash, you've got bottom ash, so you need to put that in a landfill, right? So, I mean, just because we're more familiar with the type of waste doesn't necessarily mean it's better waste. And there's a review, or there's an article in the Harvard Business Review talking about, you know, these solar panels are supposed to last 20, 25 years, but a lot of people might start replacing them after 10 or 15 because the incentives to do so are there from a financial standpoint. So a lot of these solar panels are going to be treated as electronic waste afterwards, so like VCRs, right? So like there's going to be waste associated with the wind turbines and solar panels that don't last as long, frankly, as a nuclear power plant. You can run one of those for 80 years. If you get 20 years out of a wind turbine, then that's pretty good. So the waste can be recycled, but it is stored on site and it's completely contained. So I think that the concerns about waste are not necessarily founded in like a realistic threat that it poses to human health and well-being. Yes, sir.
Isaac, what sort of future do you envision for the use of fossil fuels, and what do you think are the most effective mitigation measures to reduce the impact on the climate?
Sure, I mean, I think nuclear power is the best mitigation tool. It's the only thing that's actually capable of replacing a coal plant, right? Because if you try to replace a coal plant with wind turbines and solar panels, you're probably going to be burning a lot of natural gas, like I showed in that slide from before. So I think that we're going to continue to use it until we have better alternatives, and that's just the way things work, right? We always, like, we didn't stop using whale oil because we ran out of whales. We did it because we developed a better technology. So I think that when in terms of like home heating and transportation, that's going to be a long off-ramp for using fossil fuels. I think for electricity generation, you can do a lot more work with nuclear power in the near future than with those other sources that are more difficult. It's just like oil is such a good fuel that if it didn't already exist, we'd have to invent it. So until something like hydrogen or something of that nature comes along and is affordable, we're going to continue to use what's the least cost. Yes.
What do you think about facilities like PERC, where garbage burning, you can kind of kill two birds, one stone of getting rid of garbage and generating electricity?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I think as long as you have the scrubbers. Oh yeah, she asked about garbage burners like HERC. I think that that's fine. I mean, it's really just a land use trade-off of whether you want to have that in a landfill or whether you'd rather try to reuse it for energy. It does have a few more emissions that you want to take care of with a proper stack or something like that, but I don't have a problem with that. It's generally more expensive than using a larger like central station power plant, but if a local community wants to do that, more power to them. Yes, sir.
Can you address the safety of nuclear?
Yeah.
We hear about 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl and some natural disaster.
Yep, absolutely. So the last unit of 3 Mile Island shut down like 2 years ago. So there's that to keep in mind, right? So and also Chernobyl, they were using a reactor style that wasn't legal anywhere besides the Soviet Union. So are you guys familiar with Trofim Lysenko? All right, so he's the opposite of Norman Borlaug, right? So he is the Soviet Union's agricultural minister who had this whole idea that if we just warmed the seeds up, they'd do better in the spring. Turned out to be a huge failure, but because in the Soviet Union, if you tell the party something that they didn't like or didn't expect, you could die. So everyone just lied and said, oh, well, this Lysenko guy's really onto something. And that's one of the reasons why the Soviet Union had a huge famine. So, like, Chernobyl was a terrible mismanagement and bad reactor design. The new reactors that they're building are small modular reactors. Is essentially, they want to build them in a factory, put them on the back of a pickup truck, which is a little bit of an exaggeration, right? But they're small, they're self-contained, they can't overheat, so it's, self-contained cooling systems. So, nuclear power, when you look at it in terms of its safety record, is better than coal mining, it's better than natural gas, it's better than wind and solar. People fall off the roofs installing these things. But and when you talk about Fukushima, the tidal wave came, killed a bunch of people, but nobody died from the radiation from the nuclear plant. And so basically they had a backup diesel generator for the nuclear plant to circulate water in order to keep it from melting down. That was in the basement. And when the tidal wave came through, it flooded that and it wasn't able to operate. So if that had been on the second floor instead, you wouldn't have had a meltdown there. So more people died from the evacuation of the Fukushima area than the actual plant melting down. So yeah, I think, nuclear power actually has a really good safety record. It's just hard to get people to, acknowledge that.
I heard that China has come up with a new nuclear plant. I don't have any details on it, but supposedly safer, cleaner, or whatever. And then the second question is, can you comment on electric cars? I've heard two different things. One is that, they're great, and the other one is that all the materials that go into it are far more damaging to the environment than what you save on the electric side. So kind of a two-part question.
Yeah, I think that's a pebble reactor, something like that in China. China's building a lot of new nuclear power plants. They're building a lot of coal plants, and they're also building some wind and solar. But over there, people don't have access to power, so they're just building these things. They don't care what it is. It's like, we need electricity. It's not what kind of electricity do we need. So, and I don't blame them. I mean, everybody wants to get to our standard of living, and I think every human has that right. So for the second question is, if you want an electric car, buy an electric car. That's fine, right? But there are so they use a lot more critical minerals, they call them, so nickel, cobalt, that sort of stuff, and there are some ethical qualms with that, right? So 56% of the cobalt that's produced in the world, comes from the Congo, and in some of those areas they have kids working in cobalt mines, washing the ore in a river. But we're all complicit in that trade, right? Because all of us have a smartphone, we all have a laptop, and that's part of life, right? There's bad trade-offs that you make no matter what. But we will be increasing the demand for that product in a big way by mandating electric cars, which is why I don't think we should mandate them. I think if you want to get one and you understand some of the supply chain issues and you're cool with it, I don't have a problem with that, because I'm not gonna not have a Nintendo Switch because it has cobalt in the battery, right? So I don't want to get moralistic about this, but it's going to require a lot more nickel, which is mostly mined in the Philippines and Indonesia. But in Minnesota, we have the world's largest undeveloped nickel deposit. In the Duluth complex, right? So Minnesota could be contributing to this supply of ethical minerals. But we aren't right now. We also have the largest cobalt deposits in the United States. So that's all something that we're going to need to wrestle with moving forward. So I think we're out of time, right?
One more question.
Can you talk about the relationship between nuclear and hydrogen?
Yeah, you can use nuclear power to generate electricity, and then you use that electricity to perform hydrolysis in order to make hydrogen from water. So nuclear power doesn't necessarily generate hydrogen, but you could make carbon-free hydrogen with nuclear power. Cool. Okay. All right. Where's the scathing rebuttal? Come on, guys.
Thank you. Stay up there. Thank you, Isaac. What a fascinating overview of the history today and looking into the future of electricity, of energy. Thank you so much. I do take exception to one thing you said about Carl Borlaug being the most important graduate of the University of Minnesota.
Okay.
Up till now, Jeff O told us he was. So I'm glad you straightened that out.
I did. I put him in his place.
Well, Issac, Rotary is a global network of 1.2 million neighbors, friends, leaders, and problem solvers who see a world where people unite and take action to create lasting change across the globe, in our communities, and in ourselves. From literacy and peace to water and health, Rotarians are always working to better our world, and we stay committed to the end. In honor of your presentation, we will make a donation to My Very Own Bed, a local nonprofit that provides new beds to children moving into stable housing. My Very Own Bed gives a new bed, a set of sheets, blanket, pillow, mattress, pads, stuffed animal, and a book to children who might otherwise go without. Thanks for your presentation.
Thank you. That's much better than the human fund.
Thank you, Isaac. So coming up, we have the January 12th Leadership Series on Emotional Intelligence. We have January 13th, Edina Noon Meet with Todd Milburn, Edina Chief of Police. 20th, we have Elfrida from Baldwin from Take Charge. We have on the 20th, we also have a progressive dinner, which Josh Sprague is heading up. January 27th, we have Daryl Landstrom, U.S. Ski Association. And the 5th, we have bowling. Very exciting for bowling. At Tuttle's over in Hopkins. The quote of the day, energy conservation is a foundation of energy independence, from Tom Allen. Have a great week, everyone.